Hello, welcome sprinters. It's so good to have you all here. This is the first lecture of the Master Logseq Queries course. And I'm just checking, I am live, so I'm turning off YouTube now. I will have an eye on the chat, so please say hi in the chat, answer the question, why have you joined this course? My name is Ramses. I am community manager of Logseq. Today and the next 10 days, we'll dive very deep into the great, wondrous world of queries. If you are just new to Logseq, you have just gotten into outlining your notes instead of just writing on pages in a linear format. This might be a very unfamiliar topic for you. If you have been using Logseq for quite a while, you're maybe used to data structures or maybe even know how to program, then this will all be very easy. But we don't want to leave anyone behind. So we're going to start with the absolute basics in this course and then work all the way to workflows and to automate everything in our graph that we want to automate using queries. So I am going to have a look in the chat for some reasons that you're sharing for why you want to do this course. So let's see. I see Tarek who says, and I'll share this, to learn how to use queries to build workflows. Well, that is obviously the title of this course, but workflows will be something we're working towards. So we'll start by searching our notes. We'll start by actually first understanding what the structure of our notes is in Logseq, and then we'll use that knowledge to automate part of our knowledge workflows. Another comment from someone tuning in live now who says, I want to learn queries and also to get the sense of the best way to organize notes so that the queries will be effective. So yeah, that is something that we'll get started with tomorrow. But in this lecture, we're actually going to first get an overview of what is to come in the coming weeks and why do I do this. And let's start by sharing my screen. And it's basically to prime you for what's to come. So over the next 2 weeks, you will get via email and via the forum, you will get one lesson and one challenge per day. So the first week will fully focus on learning. So it's more the theoretical part, you will get lessons. And then in the second week, we'll apply that knowledge to different challenges, build challenges. Why I do this first lecture is to give you an overview, to prime you, to give you a little bit of an expectancy of the scope of the course. I also want to set expectations because in the previous learning sprint that we did, we also try to look into advanced queries, data log queries, but for many people that was just way too much. So this course, these 2 weeks, will only focus on simple queries, but there's enough to learn, and using this knowledge, you will really step up your game. Let's see. I want to see some more input from people before we get started, why they are learning or want to learn queries. And Elislav is sharing that he wants to make dashboards for projects and areas that will give him insights. That is really something that we'll see very soon being possible. At first, you may think queries are just a way to search my notes. But over time, you'll see that by pulling notes from all across your notes collection, you will be able to get unique insights. So Elislav, definitely a good learning goal and something that is absolutely possible. But first, if you have not had a look yet at today's lesson, which you received via email, let's first dive into what Logseq queries are. And this is something very important, but it can trip some people up by overcomplicating things, and I don't want to overcomplicate things. So a query, just think of it as a request for information. And the query language, so the actual code or the syntax that we'll use to request information from, in this case, Logseq, is called a query language. So query language is, in our case, a very simple computer language to request information from a collection of notes or a database. So if you are in any way familiar with other types of databases, and the most simple database being Google, because Google is basically a database of indexed web pages, and indexed meaning the contents of the web pages are known by Google. You can use, in the search bar, you can use search queries to search in the database of web pages that Google has indexed. Likewise, we can use a query, so a search query, to ask our notes database for results, for blocks that match our specific question. And we'll get very deep into what that means in this course. Then what we'll discuss the rest of this lecture is basically the entire outline of the course that we're going to undertake together. So now that we know what Logseq, what queries are, and specifically Logseq queries, the reason, obviously, the reason you're here is you have a why. You need to have a reason to learn about queries. And I really believe this, if you don't have a reason to learn about something, when the going gets tough, you will not keep going. So you need to have a really clear reason why you would want to learn something like queries. And as you'll see during this lecture, this builds on each other. So after the why, we'll look at the basic structure of the notes. We'll look at what it means to think like a computer, how you can use that knowledge to search your notes, and then how does that result in you being able to power your workflows. And then if there's enough time, we'll have a look at what we'll be building next week. So first, why learn to write queries? So as your collection of notes, let's call it a collection of notes, grows, it becomes more and more difficult to find what you're looking for. And I see I need to increase my text a little bit so it's easier to read on the recording. All right, perfect. So as your collection grows, it becomes more and more difficult to find what you're looking for. So most people will use the search bar in Logseq here in the top in this theme, and then just use plain text to look for any blocks that contain that piece of text. But at some point, the results will be so numerous, you'll spend so much time just scrolling through the search results, searching for something specific, that you will start to think, there's no way I can find anything in this mess of notes. And especially because you don't use really folders and pages to structure your notes in Logseq, it can become very overwhelming quickly. So queries will help you to very quickly and precisely search your notes. So as you'll see very soon, you can basically cut through all the noise just by providing a few characteristics of information that you're looking for, and then Logseq will go and scan all of the blocks in your notes collection to see if there are any blocks that match those characteristics. And we'll see soon what those characteristics are. But as an example, it could be a link, it could just be a string of text, it could be a date, it could be a tag. Anything that you can think of is possible, because there's also something called properties, which we'll discuss at the end of this week. But there's something called properties, which basically allows you to create your own data structures in Logseq. And if you're just beginning, if this is just your first step into the world of queries, you may think, this sounds very scary. Don't you worry, we'll take this step by step. So as you progress in this course, you'll start to understand better how Logseq searches through your notes. And that will hopefully inform how you structure your notes, because if you know how Logseq goes block by block looking for matching results when you're searching your notes, then you can also, how do you say it, preempt that. So you can, with that knowledge, you can structure your notes in a way that you know that when you search for them, a block will be found. And it's better, I've noticed, to think in Logseq instead of thinking about where should I store this. It's better to think in what context do I want to re-encounter this information. And once you start to write your notes with that mindset, it becomes much easier to structure them well. And once you have a good proper structure in place, and we'll look at all the tools that are available to make it more likely that you follow a common structure for your notes. But once you have that in place, you can start to power workflows. You can create basically pipeline systems in your notes database, meaning you take in a piece of information, you process that information using several steps, and then there's an output. So that is very abstract. To take an example, in a use case that is probably familiar to anyone who has ever written on the internet, you make a highlight, you take a highlight from a book or an article into your notes collection, you use a workflow to revisit that highlight or your notes about that highlight. And after a few steps, you use that insight that you got from a piece of text that you read somewhere else, you use that to explain something to someone else. So it's basically you have an input, you do some stuff with that information, and then you have an output. So it's more a systems thinking approach that you can take once you understand queries better. All right. Let me take a sip of water and see if there's any questions in the chat so far, because I will be stopping in between sections to see if there are any questions. All right. Let's continue. I see no questions. So now that we know that it's important to structure your notes, the question is, how do you structure your notes? There will be a separate lesson about this, which will be sent tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll start really at the ground floor with how do you properly use Logseq. So how should you use Logseq? And there are a few principles you need to keep in mind. There's more than enough resources that you can revisit on our YouTube channel. There's notably Office Hours 2, which is about building workflows using queries. And then there's the onboarding event. In both sessions, this is discussed at length. But the basic structure of your notes are basically blocks and branches and links. So those are the main ingredients that we need to understand well before we can start to write questions to our collection of notes, to our notes database, and get the results that we need. So first, you need to understand blocks and branches. Logseq as an outliner, that is really the most important piece of information when you're just starting out, that you understand Logseq is an outliner. I hear a lot of comparison always, mostly to Obsidian, but also other tools that take more of a file and folder approach, whereas Logseq is unapologetically an outliner. So you structure your thoughts in blocks, and a block is just a single bullet point like this, and branches. And now the green part is basically an entire branch. Let's dive a little bit into that more deeply. So in Logseq, every bullet is a block. It's the smallest unit of knowledge. And in other apps, the smallest unit of knowledge would be, for example, a page. So if you look at Obsidian, the page is probably the smallest unit of information. For some people, it can also be the heading, but in Logseq, the smallest unit of information is a bullet. So you can basically just think of a bullet as a page. So that's what we see here. Sorry, I think I skipped this one. So think of individual bullets as almost a page, but it's a mini page. But this page, this single block, contains a bunch of information. And in the course, you'll see what are all the implications. But in today's lesson, you already saw that a block in Logseq has information about what links it contains. In this case, this block doesn't contain any links, but it is part of a structure, and it's part of this branch, it's part of this branch, and it's ultimately part of the page August 22nd. So that is how branching works in Logseq. That is how the basic data structure of Logseq works. You don't organize stuff in folders, you organize your notes stuff in branches. And that is the main idea, the main differentiator between most other note-taking tools and Logseq, if you ask me. If you come from a tool like Roam Research or Workflowy or Dynalist, this will come very naturally to you. If you come from a tool like Evernote or Obsidian or some other, again, file and folder based note-taking tool, this will probably take some getting used to. So for now, just get rid of the idea of pages and folders. Just think everything is an outline. And like I said, blocks can be combined in branches or on pages, but pages are nothing more than a collection of blocks. So a page in itself, the page name is basically the contents of a block. And then everything that is on that page is basically a child block of that page. So what is a child block? Well, by indenting blocks, you create relationships, as I told, and you create something called parent-child and sibling relationships. And I have an image here that explains it probably better than I can do just using words. In this image, you see block A. It's the top block of the branch, and it's a parent block. In this case, it's not a child block because it has no blocks that are higher in hierarchy. The parent block A has 3 child blocks. The child blocks are The child blocks are B, C, and D, not A. A is the parent, and the child blocks of parent A are B, C, and D. B and C are something called sibling blocks. It's not that important to remember because using queries anyway, you cannot see sibling blocks. You can only see the parent-child relationship in queries. And if this is confusing for you now, just take this and continue in the coming days because it will become clearer. But basically, if you create your notes like this, anything you put in block D, it can also see what is in C and what is in A. Block D, like when you write a query based on information that is located in D, you can also filter on stuff that is higher in the hierarchy. For now, I'll just stop here before it gets too confusing, before we get too deep. But just know this is a key piece of knowledge that you need to understand. The parent-child relationship. If this baffles you, if you think I really have no idea what to make of this, please look at the Logseq YouTube channel, look at the onboarding events that was posted at the beginning of this year, and we'll dive much deeper into this concept. All right, so this is something we'll dive deeper into tomorrow. And then let's continue with, after we've done that, we start to think like a computer using Boolean logic. So yes, we are going to get a little bit into programming concepts, but as I said in today's lessons, I don't expect you to become a programmer. That is something I hear from most people who are really afraid that they will never understand queries because you have to type to search your notes instead of doing point and click operations. but I will promise you, this is very simple logic that you've already encountered probably. And giving the example of the search engines, you've maybe already used some of the filters, some of the filter operations in Google where you say, I'm looking for term A or B, or I'm looking for all the pages that have both term A and term B. So you've probably already used some of these filters. If you are in any way familiar with database languages, SQL most notably, you will know this. If you have worked with a little bit more advanced Excel queries, you will probably already know some of these operators. So this is some logic that we'll dive into on Wednesday. I'm not going to tell you too much about this, but for now, I want you to think about what are some other places where you have seen Boolean logic. So in the linked references, and I should have an example. Let's see if I can show an example. Yeah, so here we have some linked references. And if you have ever used the linked references, here at the bottom, you've also probably seen the filter option. And the filter option, and again, I should make this bigger so it's easier to read. It says you can include or exclude values. And these values, what are they? All these values that you can filter on are basically links. So either hashtags or the bracket links. So this is already one area where you have seen Boolean logic, where you say, for example, I want to see all the blocks that have hashtag area and that are, let's see, that are a to-do. So I only want to see all the blocks that have a link called area and that are of a type to do. So this is already an example of Boolean logic. Let's return to some other places you may have seen this. If you ever have scrolled Amazon or any other products catalog, you will often see search filters. So you say, I want to see all results where material is of this type, material type. You can say, I want to see all the products that have more than 4 stars rating. I want to see all the results going from the lowest price to the highest price. So those are all operations that you can use. Obviously, some are not Boolean operations like the sorting options, but this is also possible in Logseq. So these are some areas where you have probably already seen Boolean logic, but not knowing the term Boolean logic, you can think, oh, I'm never going to learn queries when you see the term Boolean logic for the first time. But it is something you've already used most likely. And Jim is asking, he missed where I pulled up filters. So when you go to a page, at the end of the page, you see linked references, and linked references are all the blocks, contains all the blocks that link to this specific page. And then I can filter basically the results. So I can say I only want to see all the blocks that have area and that are type to do. So those are some examples of where you've already used probably Boolean logic if you've ever used this filter option here. All right, let's continue. On Thursday, we're going to actually use this knowledge of Boolean logic, of parents and child blocks to start searching our notes. So it's a lot of knowledge you first discover before you actually start searching your notes using queries. The reason I do it like this is because I want to really create bite-sized lessons. I think overall you need between 15 and 20 minutes per day in this week to understand the basic idea, and then answering the questions, you internalize the knowledge. But first, obviously, you need a little bit of some ground knowledge before you can get started. But now on Thursday, once you have that all internalized, hopefully, we can get started with the basic filters. And in Logseq, they are the same filters as the Boolean filters. So again, we have and, or, not. But then on Friday, we'll see what some other filters are that are unique to Logseq. And we'll also start to combine filters. So we can already start to build a little bit more complex operations using nested queries. And here I just want to touch very shortly on something that might confuse some people and which might cause people to think, oh, I need to become a programmer. Once we start to nest queries, just think of queries as a mathematical equation. So you will see brackets at some point in the query syntax, and also in today's lesson, I gave one example of what a Logseq query looks like, and you see brackets. And basically what a Logseq query does is it works like a mathematical formula. So it has an order of operations. And what that means is you can use the result of one query and put it directly in another query. And that way you can very finally search your nodes using only these three basic filters. So if you're not familiar yet with Boolean logic and you wonder, how can I search my nodes using just a few filters? Well, that is how. You can use the result of one query and directly put it into another. So that is what we'll do on Thursday. Then on Friday, finally, we're going deep into variables and into the properties. So there are some built-in properties in Logseq, and there are, like I said, there is a way to create your own data structures. So that is what we'll learn on Friday. But first, templates. This is something that is missed very often. Most people who have been using Logseq for longer than a week probably know about templates. But templates are really one of the secret ingredients into structuring your notes in a way that you very easily can find them back using queries. Because when you have a template, you can pre-structure it. So for anything that you do often, it could be collect information, it could be taking meeting notes, it could be having a weekly review session or a daily review session for your work. You can use templates for that, and then very predictably, is that a word? You structure your notes. And when you know the structure of your notes, you can write queries that very precisely find back the information that you've put in. We'll also look at dynamic variables that work both in templates, but also to dynamically search in queries. And then we'll end everything with having a look at the built-in properties. So for example, between filter, the sorting filters, and then custom properties. So basically we'll start building our own data structure so we can even create more complex workflows. All right, that was a lot of talking, but I stayed within half an hour, and I now want to use some time to dive into your workflows, basically. So I have high level created 5 challenges that go from simple, using just the simple links and or not filters, to build a personal learning system. And everything that we do in between basically contributes to having a personal learning system. And I just want to hear from you what challenge you look forward to the most, and what is something that you would like to build. So something very specific. Here, for example, I say, let's see, build a project management dashboard. if that is something that appeals most to you, tell me what kind of projects you are looking to manage using Logseq. What are the inputs that we talked about? What do you do with those inputs, and what are the desired outputs? And why do I ask this? Because I am compiling a set of demo data that you will receive next week, Monday, and that is what we'll use to actually build and do these challenges. So I will provide the sample data, and then each of you individually will follow basically a specification. So I will tell you what that kind of data you need to retrieve, and then you can compare your results to the solution that I gave, and then you can also discuss why something might not work. But I want to hear from you what you're actually trying to get done. So what are your inputs? What are the operations? So how do you manipulate that information that you take into your notes system? And then what are the outputs? Because that way I can build better sample data that closer resembles your actual real life use cases. All right. And I'm just going to scroll through the comments to see if there are any questions or any use cases. And Gary, or Gerry, if you're Dutch, is asking, when you say brackets for combining queries, are there various bracketing symbols, or do you specifically mean parentheses? I don't mean parentheses, I mean square brackets. So do I have an example? Let's see. Yeah. I skipped this part, I just realized, but this is how you create links, and we'll get into this more deeply when we actually start to write queries. But you can put just text in a query, so you can just look for text. However, when you do that, you will get a lot of irrelevant queries. So what we're looking for in this course is to think about a structure. So think about, what do we need to get done using our notes? What structure do we need for that? And most importantly, what structure do we need to give our notes to actually find back our notes for our specific use cases? So to be very intentional with structuring your notes, the first level of structuring your notes is indentation. So we looked at that. And then stupidly, I skipped this part, but the second ingredient is linking actually to pages. And I just said, oh, pages are just branches, but this basically, the brackets and the hashtag act in the case of queries, they act as search terms. So you add an entry into the database and you say, hey, by putting a bracket around a word, I make this a search term in the database. And when I put that in the database, that search term, I can then enter that search term as a value when I'm using queries. So hopefully that somewhat answers your question. I'm not going to give an example yet because I want to structure this knowledge properly. So tomorrow we'll dive much deeper into this, what it means to link your to pages. And yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. But good question, Gary. Thank you. Let's see, other questions that came in. Some use cases that people are looking to use queries for. Let's see. So this is something that I see quite often, looking for a note-taking workflow that are cross-project and use queries to filter for specific topics that may span topics or projects. Yes. One use case I hear is a lot this. It's filtering most notably to-dos per project, so action items, What I also hear, what could be a very interesting use case to explore, what I'm thinking about, is adding some data that would be useful, for example, for independent project managers or consultants. So maybe have some numerical data, so you can bill clients based on the amount of work that you did. So in other words, use Logseq to track your hours for projects. That could be one use case. So let's actually just see. I've already given a use case here. Keep track of every piece of knowledge that needs your attention at some point. I would say keep track of action points for individual projects. That is something that will, I think, appeal to many people. Let's see. A question about, I'm unclear what is meant by a content consumption pipeline. Very, very good question. So my reasoning, basically how I've structured these challenges is according to 5 user archetypes. So the first user archetype is in challenge 1, is basically a student who uses Logseq to write notes and to then, when it's time for exams or a paper that needs to be handed in, so it could be in high school or just in college, is to pull together notes in a single view. So that is the simplest use case. Then a little bit more advanced, but a content consumption pipeline could be anything from someone who is a lifelong learner who collects articles, but who wants to be a little bit more conscious about what they consume for content. So instead of putting everything in a read it later app, that you maybe put articles or videos or any other content you want to check out, you put it on your journals page, and then you pull specific resources, maybe split out per topic, into a dynamic index. So we already built a dynamic index using challenge 1, but then in challenge 2, we'll maybe already start experimenting with templates, but at least we'll start to already use very specific filter options or filter values to build inboxes for content. And then once you take that a little bit further, you maybe start to think about the content that you consume and you want to share it. So this is a challenge that is very common in academics. So people who do a lot of research, challenge 2, do a lot of research, build a content consumption pipeline, but at some point you need to share your insights. So that would be challenge 3. You pull not just highlights from your graph, but maybe also pull blocks from your graph that are labeled as claims or evidence. So you become a little bit more specific in what you search for, and you start to actually push things down a longer pipeline, because a content creation pipeline has maybe as a first stage research, which is challenge 2, but then you need to outline, maybe you need to do some additional research, then you draft, you do an editing round, etc., etc. So that is in challenge 3. Once you have done a simple project like that, well, simple writing, once you have done a single pipeline, then you can start to think of multiple pipelines. So that's why we built the project management dashboard, where you pull notes from several projects and then you split them out. So that is what we do in challenge 4. And then in challenge 5, I want to pull that all together, because basically when you learn something, and this is really aimed at professionals, so lifelong learners, but also developers. I see that a lot of developers use Logseq to learn new technologies, new languages, new programming concepts. So in challenge 5, we're actually going to pull this all together and then use our notes to feed this first brain. So we'll get into into flashcards, which are basically queries, and how to structure notes so that you can learn from them. All right. It's a lot of rambling from my side for this question, but good question. All right. Let's see, Tarek, reinforcing my point, the need for queries. So Tarek says, I would like to learn how to manage information, team tasks, and follow-up items to the hundreds of meetings I go through during my work month. So I will be very curious to see how you handle things, Tarek, because this is definitely also a learning experience for me, because I really want to see how people use Logseq and then for these specific use cases, and then basically use that as product feedback. So how can we not only make queries better, but maybe also some other parts of Logseq. As for team tasks, many of you will like to hear that we are actually building a real-time collaboration feature set. It's not ready yet. It's not even planned for release yet, because the first step will be file sync. So that is just for single player databases, for single player graphs. Single player meaning just one user, one person has access to those nodes. And that is also what this course will focus on. So just a caveat for the scope, but team tasks, absolutely something that is on our radar, and also that is a need that we ourselves have, because we're actually using Logseq to build Logseq. So all right, let's see other use cases. And yeah, this, I really like to see this. So Jim is saying that he's interested in the personal learning system and project management systems. And that is really one of my goals, that I want to show you that queries is not just to search. It's better to think of queries as saved search, as a tool to create inboxes for knowledge, to program your attention, and to then take action on knowledge that you need to see. So I see Ronnie saying something similar, who says, my primary use is for learning management, feeding notes and highlights into Logseq through Readwise. That is a really good use case, actually. And now that I think of it, the way I have set up Readwise is really to leverage the templates, the custom templates that Readwise enables, to structure my notes, and then I can fire off a query at the top of a page that then looks for different specific notes. So that is definitely something I'm going to write down. Let's see, intake, highlights, and notes from Readwise. Yeah. So that is definitely something that I think is common, that many people will have. So Ronnie, thank you for the insight, for sharing this, because this is exactly the kind of input I'm looking for to create a sample data set that is closer to your real life use cases. So great. Let's see. Then Tarek is asking, can you query across separate graphs? I don't know, but, and this is completely outside of the scope of this course, but there is a command line tool that is available. So if you want, Tarek, send me a message on Discord, because there is some command line tool for this. Obviously, this is completely outside of the scope of this course. So the question currently, can you query across separate graphs? No. Unless you feel comfortable with the command line, then there are definitely some tools. And that is basically one of our goals with Logseq, is to create a input method to create graph data. So graph data being putting your notes in a database, in a searchable, logical database. I see more people sharing that they want to use Logseq for learning. Yeah, and then I see Jerry also mentioning, I'm interested in dynamic index and personal learning system. Personal learning system mostly route usage of programming language and development environments. Very good input and feedback. Thank you, Jerry. Because some of the other courses that I want to create around Logseq are how to use Logseq to learn other skills, most notably programming. And one of the courses that hopefully will be will run either at the end of this year or somewhere beginning next year is to use Logseq to learn enough HTML and CSS to create your own Logseq theme. So many of the principles that will work so indentation, nesting, linking, those principles later will come back if you choose to dive deeper into programming, if you choose to go into web development, because basically any HTML, any web document is structured like a tree and branch and leaf structure. So the way we indent our nodes, that is also how a web document is structured in many ways. So if this is something you're interested in, please reach out to me, let me know, because this again will help me to create some content for next week's demo data that will hopefully give you some examples of how you could use Logseq as a learning system. And I can use many of my own notes about CSS and HTML. Let's see, we have 10 more minutes and I'm just going to continue answering questions. Let's see. Good question by Tarek. Something we're going to get into much more deeply later. But Tarek's asking, do you recommend that all blocks, that one adds all blocks in the journals page that are then funneled through links or pipelines, queries? I would say yes in 95+% of the cases. It really depends on how you use Logseq, what you're comfortable with. I see many people writing on pages primarily. I see people who use the journals page primarily. It really depends on what your use case is. So for example, if your use case is project management and you want to keep track, and time is a very important component, so dates, because for example, you have reviews or you need to send updates to stakeholders regarding a specific time period, then writing everything on your journals page, definitely recommended. If you silo your projects a little bit more, time is not really an important component, then by all means use more pages. That is basically what I do. But we'll get more into these nuances much more deeply in this course. But good question. Yeah, and Jim is saying, and I cannot promise anything, but Jim is saying, and I know it's a need that many people have, but it's to import Zotero data into Logseq and then use it more or less like how you would import Readwise data. I'm not sure if Jay Colbert is joining us this sprint. I hope he is, because he is a librarian and an academic, and he is a Zotero power user, and I think soon becoming a Logseq power user. So I hope he can provide some input on this. He has written already in the Query Sprint forum some things, and he has shared some of his articles that describe basically his workflow. I know he says that he doesn't like to import everything from Zotero, and he has some reasons for that. I'm not able, I think, to showcase this myself because I don't use Zotero, and I don't think I would be able to provide good sample data. But if someone is hearing this and thinks, I have great Zotero data and I want to show that off, by all means, please send me a DM, maybe record a quick loom that you just shared to the forum. Maybe I can learn something, and I can include some sample data for Zotero. Ronnie is asking about the graph view and saying, I love using the journal, but it feels it kind of messes up the graph view. Am I doing something wrong, or is this common? Yeah, the way that currently the graph view works, it's really based on page names. The graph view is not in the scope of this course because we are really looking for actual textual content. So we're searching through content. The graph view is more of a tool to explore your notes by clicking through them. So what we do is very precisely cut through all the noise to the information that we're looking for. Whereas a graph view, you would click from page to page, from block to block, to explore your notes that way. So there's definitely merit in that. There's definitely a lot of things that we can improve, but there's already some great plugins that enrich your graph view. Again, it's outside of the scope of this course because we're really looking to cut through all the noise directly to very specific information. But it's a good question. And if your primary means of searching through your notes is your graph view, then dumping everything on the journals page might not be the solution. What would be the solution? If I were you, I would ask in the community, look on the forum, see if there's people that have examples. I don't use it that much. I really use queries mostly, so that's why I'm focusing on it now. Let's see. Yeah, Carl is asking. The question has not been asked, Carl, at least not in this session, but it has been asked in the community quite a bit. So Carl's wondering if Logseq has any plans to make queries less codey. So I would say more like Notion maybe, so where you actually filter tables of data. The way Logseq works is like filtering, for example, like Notion. I don't think it's very likely. There are definitely ways that we can make creating query easier because now there's not really a debugger. So if there's a mistake in your query, it's not really clear where you made the mistake. We are thinking of a graphical user interface, but this is also something that I like to explore as I'm learning to code. I want to see if I can maybe create a plugin that can create a query for you. So maybe use some value, use some drop downs for filter values, and then help you think through writing a query. That is one use case I see for plugins, something that I want to explore personally. The debugger is something that's definitely on our radar. And then more of an interface, we don't know yet. So if there are ideas for how to improve this, we have on the forum, we have a feature request section. So we've already gotten some really good feedback to make other parts of Logseq better, some really concrete specifications. So if you have any idea how we could improve it, please by all means share it. In the meanwhile, obviously, we will be using the experiences from this course to see what is very confusing to people and how can we basically take care of some of the intricacies of writing queries. So how can we make it less error prone, for example? How can we give better error messages, etc., etc. So good question, Carl. Thank you. Let's see. Jacob is asking, he didn't get the first email. How can you access the training graph? There's no training graph yet. So as I've said a few times in this lecture, the training graph will come next week. Make sure you have signed up. So go to discuss.logseq.com, and then there is, and let me just share this. Go to discuss.logseq.com, and then you go to the query sprints. Let's make this bigger. And then this is the first lesson. And I can put that in the chat if you didn't get the first lesson. In case you didn't, let's see, if you didn't sign up, let's see. Make sure you have filled in this form. I've put the link in the chat. All right. We're coming up on time. I'm going to answer some of the last questions that are in the chat. Let's see. We're already getting a little bit deeper. Tarek is asking, can you query on assets? If your question is, can a query look into an asset? So can it look into a PDF to then search that PDF, or can it somehow do optical character recognition on images? Then the answer is no. We'll learn in this course how to add some links if you want to find back those images, and we'll obviously also see how the rest of the blocks that are higher up the branch basically can give links or filter values to the blocks, and blocks can contain an asset. So using some of the basically the metadata functionality, either properties or links, you can make assets findable, but it's not like that Logseq looks into the actual assets to find. Let's see. Other questions. Ronnie's asking, will we go through properties and querying? Yes, we will. So as I showed in the outline, how to power your workflows using properties and variables. So we'll use built-in properties like the dates, the dates from the journals pages for the between filter. We'll use the task filter for to-dos, and we can even filter on different priorities. We can filter on different stages that a to-do is in. And then we'll also look at custom properties. And what is a custom property? It's when you write double colon, and then you can start creating your own data structures, basically. So that is in store for later this week. And this is a really good comment, and something that we've been thinking about. Question is, what if there were a query library on the forum where there would be no questions or chat, just a repository for queries that people want to share with the community? Great idea. There is already the hub. So we already have hub.logseq.com. The idea is to soon also here have queries here. Obviously, you can also just share things on the forum. So if you go to the forum, you'll see that there is a section, look what I built. So some people have already created some queries, some workflows. Obviously, this section needs way more promotion, but the idea is to distill query examples from this subforum and then showcase it on the Logseq community hub. So great suggestion. It's just that we need more input for this, but I think it all starts with education. So our documentation for queries definitely needs to become better, clearer, more examples, and then content like this course will hopefully help to get that going. All right, that's it. for this first lecture. Between now and next week, Monday, you will receive 4 more lessons. We'll take the weekends off, so rest, recharge, maybe look or watch at some other videos about queries, look at some examples that people are posting in the forum. Post your own examples. Let's get that repository of queries started. If you have any questions, please put it in the forum. And I will share where you can find it. So the forum for the queries, it's a little bit hidden. So bookmark it. It's called Query Learning Sprints. I'll put the link in the chat. I will post the lessons to the forum every day. I will pin it so you can just go to this subforum, and then every day there will be a exercise. For the lessons, it will be mostly writing prompts to help you process the information more deeply, to challenge you to think of other examples, and this way we can really create a corpus of query knowledge. And I've already seen some people that know nothing about queries, that for whom the word query in itself is new, to people who are programmers already. And I think learning from each other will be very interesting. So answer these questions, read through the questions of other people, especially if you struggle with the lesson or the explanation in the lesson. So if you cannot answer these questions, maybe my explanation was not good enough, but by reading the answers that other people have, hopefully someone else can explain it to you in terms that you will understand it. So that is how you can help out each other by answering these writing prompts. All right, that's enough of me rambling. I'm going to have dinner and then finish writing tomorrow's lesson. So if you have any question, if especially there was anything unclear about indentation or linking, please send me a DM, and I will put my username again in the chat so you can send me a DM. Feel free to do that. For now, I want to thank you for attending this live lecture. Thank you for the great questions, the great comments, for the encouragement. I was a little bit nervous, to be honest, before starting, but it all flowed away as I was talking to you and saw your great insights and questions. So I want to thank you all. Wherever you are, have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.